Good morning, welcome back. This is a special coverage of Budget 2023-2024, the first for the Kenya Kwanza administration, and the presentation set to be made in Parliament later in the day by the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, who will today read President William Ruto's maiden budget as his administration gears up to deliver on the pledges and the promises he made, titled or codenamed The Plan, launched in June last year. And the papers say, while Dr. Ruto says we must all endure the pain in the short term, the long term will be good as the government embarks on the rebooting of the country's economy and the growth which they say would be enabled to increment in the streams of our taxes in the country. We now cross over to the National Treasury, where Faisal Ahmed is standing by at the moment with the Principal Secretary at the National Treasury, Dr. Chris Kiptoo, at his office here in Nairobi. Good morning, Faisal. And what are the assessments that are forthcoming from the Principal Secretary's office as his boss prepares for the presentations later in the afternoon in Parliament?
Thank you very much, Ayub. As you've rightfully said, we are at the National Treasury building here with Dr. Chris Kiptoo, who's the Principal Secretary for the National Treasury, and planning just to get an understanding of what is actually going on here and what Kenyans should expect from the government. This being the first budget of the new administration, there are a lot of hopes, there are a lot of questions, and basically these are what we are seeking answers to, not only right now but also later on in the day as the CS presents his budget to the National Assembly. Now, thank you very much, Dr. Maybe you can just join me. We'll try and understand maybe the process of the budget making, the whole budget making process and what is going on right there. Maybe, Dr. just to start us off, how long ago did this process start, the budget making process?
Thank you very much. Section 36 of the Public Financial Management Act stipulates the procedures and the processes that we have to go through to prepare a budget. So it takes a whole year. From July, as soon as the year begins, we have ministries, departments and agencies reflecting on the medium-term development. So ministries, they prepare their strategic plans, and then the National Treasury issues a circular called the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, and then by September, we form sector working groups where all ministries are grouped together based on thematic areas. In those sector working groups, we have budget ceilings. So discussions are held around the priority areas for each of those sectors. And then after that, we come up with what we call BROP, Budget Outlook Framework. Then we go through the process of each of the sector working groups coming up with a budget. And then by December, we have a draft budget policy statement. That budget policy statement now is approved by Parliament, but it has to go first through public hearings. So we go through public hearings, and you may have seen a number of them at the KICC and across the country, where we want wananchi to contribute to the budget making process. And then we take into account that which the public says, and we now have a concluded public BPS, which is called budget policy statement. Then that is submitted to Cabinet and then to Parliament. When Parliament approves, then now we come back to prepare the budgets. So ministries now begin to prepare estimates, and by 30th April, which is the constitutional timeline, that budget must be ready, which we now prepare and submit to Parliament. Then over that period, Parliament goes through also public hearings, trying to look at it, and culminating now in a day like today, where the budget is read by the Minister, by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury. After the reading today, then Parliament will now also go through it to do the appropriation. And by 30th June, we will have an appropriation bill, which the President now will assent to, and it becomes law. And now the following year, the budget is implemented. That's the whole process. And it's a very long process. It involves many stakeholders. Our staff here work so hard. And in fact, I want to thank them because they have not slept for the last few days preparing for this budget.
Yes. Doctor, I've actually seen many of them walking around here with files, moving up and down, in and out of your office. Just the thought process that has gone into this. You've said that there are different working sector groups, there are different ministries that are involved in this. This being the first budget of this administration, maybe what are some of the key drivers, without preempting the CS's speech later on, what are some of the key drivers or some of the key issues that you want to look at or tackle with this year's budget?
First of all, this government came in at a time when the country is facing multiple shocks, both external and internal. External in the sense that we have a number of, like the COVID-19, then the Ukrainian war. So the huge shock, what we call perfect storm. You've been hearing about that. Then here, climate change, which we have a lot of impact. So within that context, and the government is coming in having promised, it presented its manifesto. And so the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza is what forms the key priority in this budget. And the minister is going to be stipulating the areas of priority. I don't want to preempt now. But the Kenya Kwanza, what we call bottom-up economic transformation, better, is what is going to form the basis. So we provide the policy framework, and then the context in which we are preparing this budget, and then the policy priorities that we would like the resources that we have to focus on. And those, so the policies that we have come up with are now getting the budget, and that is what the minister is going to be presenting on how much he has given to policy areas that we have given. Then he is going to now present to us the measures, how he's going to raise resources to finance what is in the budget. And of course, you have the finance bill, which is already before Parliament, and other measures that we are going to be taking in order to prepare to finance the budget. It is a long process. It has not been easy because, as I said, we have multiple shocks. The promises are many, the expectations are a lot, and we are facing a lot of challenges. High cost of living is a reality that we have. We have a debt situation that is not allowing us to borrow more because we have 10 trillion by law, and now we are almost at the limit. So we have to look at it and say, do we finance through borrowing, or we have to do other alternative ways, maybe raise more taxes or other ways. So these are the things that is going into the budget making process, and my minister therefore will be presenting the totality of all the things that we have considered. And of course, there will be, I will only say that it's good that if we have to grow our nation, it is important not to grow our nation through debt. That is why this government has gone through what we call fiscal consolidation, where we want over the medium term to reduce our appetite for financing our budgets through debt. So meaning we have to expand the revenue measures, contain expenditures, use other areas like PPP, for instance, public-private partnerships, so that we are still able to do our development while at the same time not carrying a lot of debt. And so this is why you see this discussion around taxes and raising taxes. It's time to review these taxes and see which ones could we review, which one could we increase, which one could we reduce. And I would only say there will be gains and there will be losers, but overall we need to take some pain as Kenya in order to take our country to the next level, because we really cannot afford to continue borrowing. I can tell you that. Debt is a big constraint, and I think we need to discipline ourselves out of debt. And so my minister will be therefore presenting a proposal that has taken all that into account. But we are aware that Kenyans are expectant of, given the promises that were made by this government. From where I sit, I think I see hope. I'm very confident that over the medium term, we will do well.
And Dr. just from the final statement that you've made, it will be a bit painful for Kenyans, but it will get better in the long run. And we need to fund this budget using taxes and not debt. Maybe in that sense, with the current situation that we are in, with the high cost of living and everything, the economy is still recovering from COVID and whatnot. So how will you balance that, raising revenues and also making sure that Kenyans are not pinched even further?
The important thing is that even as we raise revenue, the focus going forward will be about productivity and getting value for money in our expenditure. So the main focus is not just about revenue, it's about how we are spending the money. And this is going to be the focus going forward in terms of looking at non-priority areas. I'm sure the minister will indicate some of those, trying to see that it will also stipulate measures that we have taken to handle or to do away with inefficiencies that are there within the expenditure framework. I don't, because he's going to present, it's unfair for me to use this forum to say what he's going to say. But all I'm saying is that we want to focus on expenditure rationalization and see that we derive value for money. On revenue-raising measures, we want every Kenyan to contribute to raising of revenue, because taxation is supposed to be equitable. Whether you are small or big, you pay based on your capacity. And so this issue of paying tax is something that we would like every Kenyan to know, that if you need a road, if you need electricity, if you need any development to be done, it can't just be done from resources that have not been generated internally. It is our obligation as citizens to raise the resources. And so I think the citizens can demand of us, government, of how we have used the resources, but they have an obligation to contribute and to raise those resources. And I think that is a debate that is ongoing, and it is something that we want over the medium term. Of course, we would like to have less burden when it comes to taxing. You know, if there's a way, if the economy grows, definitely there will be a situation where it will not be seen to be high. I know there's a debate on whether Kenyans are highly taxed, but you can see across the world that you just need to look at the figures, and you will see that we are not really taxed. In fact, our revenue to GDP, we're talking about 15 to 17% over the recent past, when we want to be at 25%. So we still have a long way to go. And so I ask Kenyans, let's have that debate, but I think we really need to contribute. In fact, if we all make sure that we pay taxes, I don't think we need to be actually relying on debt. Our hope is that in the medium term, we can actually run a budget surplus. It is possible. You've seen here, you see that we have moved away from around 8.3% of GDP fiscal deficit in the last 2 years. This year, then this government came in, we reduced the fiscal deficit from 6.2% of GDP to 5.7%. So we were borrowing about 850 billion. In this, which the minister is going to present, you will see, because it's public knowledge, we have come now to 4.4% of GDP. And we are working towards 3.6% by 2026. So we hope by 2030, we should have been able to generate enough revenue that can match our expenditures. And therefore, we don't need to be relying on debt. And then we should be therefore be able to address the issue of cost of living, raise the prosperity of Kenyans, because we want a prosperous nation, a nation that is prosperous and where everybody is getting the benefits. So that's why we are looking for inclusive growth. It's not just growth, but inclusive growth that takes everyone on board. That is why we talk of bottom up, because majority of the people at the bottom haven't yet felt. We want to lift the people at the bottom up, and through the policy measures that we are taking in place. I am hoping that there will be more debate, and so that we can expound to Kenyans more about what is in this budget after my minister has read.
Dr. Just before I let you go, you've talked about revenue collection and how it's going to drive growth and also maybe reduction of taxation in the medium term. Just finally, before I let you go back to work, what are you doing to empower the taxman to ensure that they collect revenues, the targets that you've set for them? And looking at this year's targets that you've set for them, and also looking at the fact that it has reduced and they've not been able to collect as much as was set earlier, what can be done to ensure that they collect what is required of them and the targets that are set for them are also realistic?
Actually, strengthening KRA is our biggest concern now, and it's our priority. We would like it to have at least 2% of revenues generated, and we have already, even in this budget, we have given additional resources. Even a few months ago, we have given additional resources to Kenya Revenue Authority to get not just the human resource, but also additional capacity by way of infrastructure, so that they do not have a reason to say they can't raise. We are therefore really building more capacity for KRA, supporting them so that they are in a position to move, and that's why they are actually recruiting more staff, even for those who will be helping in getting more revenues out there. So we are doing our best to make sure that at the top level and even the rest of the Kenya Revenue Authority, they are strengthened to be in a position where they don't have a reason to complain that they can't raise money. So I think you will see in the budget, and we will continue supporting them as and when necessary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ayub, that was Dr. Chris Kiptoo, the PS for the National Treasury and Planning, just giving us a lay plan of what we should be expecting from the budget ahead of what the CS is going to be presenting later on in the day. We expect him to go to Parliament at 3 p.m. We will be here with him before then, and we are hoping actually to speak to him before then and for him to explain to us what goes into the budget-making process, and this being the government's first budget, or this administration's first budget, what Kenyans should be expecting from it. Ayub.
And from the Treasury offices of the Principal Secretary at the National Treasury, Dr. Chris Kiptoo, laying an emphasis on what went into what will be presented before Parliament later this afternoon by the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, his maiden debut, and the presentations that he will make for Kenya Kwanza's first budget for the fiscal year 2023-2024.